The Merchant and the Elf, Part 1. The Man Nobody Would Miss. There were men in Greyhaven whom people hated for things they had done, and there were men whom people hated because hatred, once inherited, was easier to maintain than reconsider. Tobin Vale belonged to the second kind. His father had seen to that. Long before Tobin was old enough to understand why shopkeepers watched his hands whenever he entered their stores, Edric Vale had accumulated enough debts, broken promises, drunken fights, and unpaid wages to make the Vale name something people spoke with the same expression they used when discovering mold on bread. Then Edric disappeared. That should have ended it. It did not. Greyhaven simply transferred the account to his son. By 23, Tobin had stopped expecting anything different. He stood beneath the crooked awning of his market stall while rainwater gathered along its sagging edge and occasionally spilled onto the shoulder of his coat. Before him sat several jars of preserves, 2 bundles of dried lavender, 3 small bottles of lamp oil, a collection of sewing needles, leather cord, 2 whetstones, a box of buttons, and 1 iron cooking pot he had been trying to sell for nearly 4 months. The pot had become personal. Every market day, Tobin set it near the front of the stall with the unreasonable confidence that someone would finally recognize the extraordinary value of owning a medium-sized iron cooking pot with only a modest crack near the handle. Every evening, without exception, it went back into his carriage. Today seemed determined to continue the tradition. Mistress Havel stood across from him with one of his blackberry preserves held toward the grey afternoon light. She narrowed her eyes at the jar, as though the berries had personally attempted to deceive her. 1 copper. Tobin rested both palms against the table and studied her with patient disappointment. 2. 1, she repeated, turning the jar slowly between her fingers. The berries are bruised. A tired smile tugged at one corner of Tobin's mouth. They've been cooked, Mistress Havel. At this point, their appearance is largely ceremonial. Her face did not move. 1 copper. Tobin breathed out through his nose and gently removed the jar from her hand. He had learned long ago that there were customers with whom negotiation was an art and customers with whom it was warfare. Mistress Havel had never negotiated anything in her life. She simply announced what she intended to pay, and then waited for the other person to become exhausted. 2 coppers, he said, placing the jar back on the table between them. You're going to carry it home again. I would rather eat it myself than sell it for 1. She folded her arms beneath her shawl. You owe my brother 4 coppers. That, Tobin said, tilting his head slightly, has nothing whatsoever to do with blackberries. You owe Master Rennick 6. That also has nothing to do with blackberries. And the stablemaster says you owe him nearly a silver. Tobin stared at her for several seconds before his eyebrows rose. Have you considered employment as a tax collector? I've considered telling everyone in this market not to buy from you. His faint smile returned. Mistress Havel, I don't believe you possess that kind of influence. She did not answer. Instead, her eyes moved past his shoulder. Tobin followed her gaze and saw 3 people who had been examining a bundle of lavender quietly turn away from his stall. One woman whispered something to her husband before they moved toward another merchant. The smile faded from Tobin's face. Mistress Havel placed a single copper on the table. This time he did not argue. He looked at the coin, then at her, and finally slid the jar across to her. She tucked it beneath her arm and walked away without thanking him. Tobin watched her disappear into the thinning crowd. Pleasure doing business, he called. She raised one hand over her shoulder without turning around, though the gesture contained considerably less goodwill than Tobin's words had implied. He picked up the copper and slipped it into his purse. The purse was far too light. That was becoming a problem. By sunset, the rain had strengthened, and most of the merchants were packing their stalls beneath a gathering darkness. Tobin counted his money beneath the shelter of the awning. 2 silver and 13 copper. He frowned and counted again, moving each coin carefully from one palm to the other. 2 silver and 13 copper. Apparently, mathematics had no sympathy. Tobin tucked the purse beneath his coat and looked around Greyhaven's market square. Smoke rose from stone chimneys surrounding the square, and lanterns were appearing behind windows as families prepared for supper. Somewhere nearby, a baker was removing the final loaves of the evening from an oven, and the warm smell drifted across the market with enough cruelty to remind Tobin that he had eaten nothing since morning. For a moment he considered buying bread, then he reconsidered. Hunger was free, bread was not. Tobin. The voice reached him from across the square. His shoulders lowered slightly. He knew it. He slowly closed the wooden lid over his coin box. Master Rennick approached through the rain with 2 men walking several paces behind him. Rennick was not especially large, but wealth had given him the confidence of one. He owned the grain warehouse, 2 mills, several houses, and according to Rennick, a distressingly large portion of Tobin's future. Tobin, he repeated as he stopped beneath the awning. Tobin straightened and offered him a restrained smile. Master Rennick, you were supposed to see me yesterday. I was. Rennick's brow tightened. You didn't. I didn't. Why? Tobin glanced toward the rain with exaggerated consideration. The weather. Rennick looked out from beneath the awning and then slowly back at him. It wasn't raining yesterday. I anticipated today's rain and became discouraged. The 2 men behind Rennick remained expressionless. Tobin had not expected them to laugh. Rennick stepped closer, and whatever humor had been in Tobin's face quietly disappeared. You owe me. Tobin nodded. Yes. 23 silver. 21. 23. Tobin frowned as though someone had committed a serious administrative error. Then someone has altered the numbers. You borrowed 20 and have paid 5. You paid 2. I distinctly remember 5. Rennick reached beneath his coat and tapped 2 fingers against the small ledge tucked inside. I have the book. Tobin glanced toward it, then sighed. That seems unfair. You have written evidence. Rennick took another step forward. The air between them changed. There were moments when wit was useful, and there were moments when it simply irritated the man deciding whether your ribs remained intact. Tobin understood the difference well enough to stop smiling. I'll have it, he said. Rennick's eyes did not leave him. When? Soon. When, Tobin? Belcross has a winter market beginning in 3 days. I'm leaving tonight. Rennick slowly looked over the collection of goods still spread across Tobin's table. His gaze settled on the battered pot. With this? Tobin followed his eyes and rested a hand protectively on the pot. The pot is worth more than it appears. For several seconds, Rennick simply studied him. Then he leaned close enough that Tobin could smell cloves on his breath. You have 7 days. Tobin's face remained still. Rennick's voice lowered. If you return without my money, I take the carriage. Something changed behind Tobin's eyes, only slightly. Rennick saw it. The carriage was not merely transportation, it was Tobin's shop, his storage room, and more often than not his home whenever weather permitted. The left rear wheel had been repaired so many times it hardly resembled the original, and the faded green canvas leaked near one corner whenever it rained heavily. But none of that mattered. It had belonged to his mother. It was the last thing she had left him. Rennick's mouth curved into a thin smile when he realized he had finally found something Tobin could not joke about. 7 days. He turned and walked away. His men followed. Tobin remained beneath the awning while rain drummed against the cloth overhead. He did not move until Rennick disappeared beyond the square. Eventually, he lowered his gaze toward the iron pot. You had better sell in Belcross. The pot offered no reassurance. Tobin left Greyhaven shortly after dark. His mule, Bishop, objected to travelling through cold rain by stopping every few hundred yards and looking back at Tobin as though requesting a reasonable explanation for their circumstances. The third time he did it, Tobin leaned forward on the driver's bench. "You eat for free." Bishop considered this and resumed walking. The carriage rattled behind him. It was not much to look at. The green canvas covering had faded almost grey. The rear axle complained whenever the road became uneven, and the left wheel had accumulated so many patches that Tobin no longer remembered what the original wood looked like. But it was his that mattered. Greyhaven's lanterns slowly disappeared behind the hills. Tobin did not look back. He had left the town many times before, usually for a market or trading run, but there had always been some certainty that he would return. Tonight felt different. 7 days, 23 silver. He had 2 silver and 13 copper to his name. He needed a miracle. Unfortunately, Tobin had never been under the impression that miracles possessed much interest in merchants. The northern road entered the forest several miles beyond Greyhaven, where enormous black pines crowded together so tightly that even daylight struggled to reach the ground. Travellers generally avoided this stretch after sunset because wolves occasionally came down from the mountains. There were stories about other things as well. Tobin did not believe those. He believed in wolves because wolves had teeth. He believed in debt because debt had consequences. And he believed in hunger because his stomach was presently making a compelling argument for its existence. Ghosts, spirits, forest witches, and ancient creatures could wait until they learned to produce invoices. Near midnight, Tobin found an old roadside shrine and decided he had travelled far enough. The shrine had once belonged to some forgotten saint whose stone face had been worn smooth by rain and centuries. A small clearing beside it provided room for the carriage, while a pair of enormous oaks offered shelter from the worst of the weather. Tobin unhitched Bishop, tied him beneath one of the trees, and managed to coax a small fire from damp branches. He sat beside it with the heel of yesterday's bread between his fingers. "Belcross is going to change everything," he told Bishop. The mule continued chewing. "They have wealthy people." Bishop's jaw worked lazily. "Wealthy people buy unnecessary things." One ear twitched. Tobin pointed his bread toward him. "They may even buy the pot." Bishop finally looked at him. Tobin nodded with satisfaction. "Exactly." When the bread was gone and the fire had burned low, Tobin crawled beneath the canvas of the carriage. The interior smelled of damp wood, lamp oil, lavender, and mule. He removed his coat, folded it beneath his head, and stretched out between several crates. His eyes had barely closed when something shifted near the rear. Tobin's body became still. He listened. Rain whispered across the canvas. Bishop moved outside, nothing else. Then Tobin heard breathing, not his. His hand slipped carefully beneath the blanket beside him and closed around the handle of the knife he kept there. He sat up without speaking. A second breath came from behind the crates. Tobin drew the knife and held it close to his body. "Whoever you are," he said quietly, forcing more confidence into his voice than he felt, "I should warn you that I am considerably more dangerous than this carriage suggests." Nothing answered. He swallowed. "I have killed men." Silence. His grip tightened. Several. Still nothing. One of them was enormous. A crate shifted. Tobin's mouth closed. He reached for the lantern, struck a spark, and lifted the newly awakened flame. "Come out." He moved the lantern toward the rear. 2 crates of lamp oil stood beside the iron pot. Several blankets were stacked against his merchandise chest, and behind them something moved. Tobin raised the knife. "I'm not going to ask again." A hand slowly appeared. The fingers were slender and empty. Then a face emerged from the darkness. For several seconds, Tobin simply stared. She was young, perhaps his age, although he knew enough about elves to understand that appearances meant little where their kind were concerned. He had never actually seen one before. Greyhaven had stories about elves. Everyone did. Some spoke of enchanted forests and stolen children, others of armies that had vanished in the northern woods, or beautiful women who lured foolish men away from the road. The creature crouching behind Tobin's merchandise did not resemble any of those stories. She looked terrified. Long, dark hair clung wetly to her face and shoulders. Beneath streaks of dirt, her skin appeared pale and strangely luminous in the lantern glow, while her ears tapered unmistakably through the strands of her hair. Blood covered one sleeve and had darkened the cloth along her ribs. Tobin's stomach tightened, his knife lowered a fraction. Elf. Her green eyes moved from his face to the blade in his hand. "Please," she whispered. Tobin's lips parted, and a look of immediate resignation crossed his face. No, the fear in her expression briefly gave way to confusion. "I haven't asked you anything. You said please." He shook his head slowly. Nothing pleasant has ever followed that word. Her eyes searched his face. "I need your help." There it is. She began to crawl from behind the chest, but Tobin immediately backed toward the opening and lifted the knife again. "Stay there." She froze, both hands visible. "Please. You already used that one. They're looking for me." The humor vanished from Tobin's eyes. "Who?" Her gaze flicked toward the canvas behind him. "Men." Tobin frowned. "That is an extremely broad category." "Soldiers." He lowered the knife slightly. That was worse. "What soldiers?" Leora hesitated and Tobin caught it immediately. His jaw tightened. "Get out." Her eyes widened. "Please, I can't. Out. They'll kill me." Tobin stared at her. "Then you should have chosen a carriage belonging to someone capable of preventing that. I had nowhere else. You still don't. This is barely a carriage." She shifted toward him. Tobin's arm stiffened. "Don't." She stopped. Now that she was fully in the lantern light, he could see how badly she had been hurt. Blood had soaked through the material along one side. Bruises darkened one wrist, while the skin around the other had been rubbed raw, as though rope or iron had been cinched around it for a long time. Something changed in Tobin's expression. He immediately disliked that it had. His eyes returned to her face. "Where did you come from?" "Greyhaven." Tobin blinked. "How long have you been inside my carriage?" "Since before sunset." His mouth fell open slightly. "You hid in here while I was loading it?" She nodded. "How?" For the first time, a faint spark of something besides fear touched her eyes. "You were arguing with a woman about preserves." Tobin paused. His indignation looked almost genuine. "That was a complicated negotiation." The corner of her mouth twitched. It was barely a smile. Tobin saw it anyway. Then voices sounded outside. Every trace of amusement disappeared from both of them. Tobin extinguished the lantern. Darkness swallowed the carriage. At first there was only rain. Then came the unmistakable rhythm of horses moving along the road. Several of them. Tobin looked toward the elf, though he could barely make out the shape of her. She was trembling, not dramatically. She had wrapped both arms around herself as though determined to keep him from noticing. He noticed. "Stay here," he whispered. As Tobin turned toward the opening, her hand closed around his wrist. He looked down. Even in the darkness, he could feel her fingers shaking. "Please don't tell them." Tobin remained still. "I don't even know you." "I know. You climbed into my carriage without permission." "I know. You have soldiers hunting you." Her grip loosened slightly. "Yes. And whatever you've done has now become my problem." There was a pause before she answered. "I know." When Tobin looked toward her face, he could just make out the shine of tears gathered in her eyes. She did not let them fall. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he gently removed her hand from his wrist and climbed outside. 4 riders were approaching the shrine. Their armor was black, not painted black. Blackened steel. As the first rider moved into the light of the dying fire, Tobin recognized the crest on his cloak. A white tower beneath a red crown. His stomach sank. The king's wardens, not town guards. Not hired swords, These men answered directly to the crown. The lead rider stopped beside the fire. His horse was enormous, and from the saddle he seemed to tower over Tobin. The warden looked down at him. "You." Tobin slowly arranged his face into the smile he used whenever he had no money, no plan, and absolutely no idea what was going to happen next. It was a very practiced smile. "Good evening."